welcome. This is our last session. We do have a lot to get through, so I'm going to dive straight in. And we're going to start with a little recap of some of the stuff that we've been covering so far. Let's jump in, super quick recap, and then on to new stuff. So, can anybody remember or tell me what an if statement is used? Exactly. So if a condition is true, we run a specific block of code. Exactly. And an if statement, can you remember what the syntax looks like? Hey, Joseph, welcome. Exactly. So we have our if keyword, we have our parenthesis with the condition in it, and then our curly brackets and the block of code that we want to run. And then we could also have an else, which would be after the curly brackets with its own little curly brackets. Lovely. So just some things for you to head compute. Let's try out some conditions. So what would the following return? False, exactly. So what we're saying here is 3 is greater than 4 and 5 is less than 6. So we know that 3 is not greater than 4, but 5 is less than 6. So this would return true. This would return false. And because this is an and, we need both sides to return true in order for it to return true. So it will return false. Okay, one more for you. What about this one? True, exactly. So 3 is less than 4 and 8 is less than 60. They're both true, so it's true. How about this one? This one is true because this is an or. So only one side needs to be true, but we actually have both sides are true, so this is going to return true. How about this one? This one's also true. And I think we've got one more. About this one. This one's false. I like the Pradeep is getting in there so quickly. He's only typing the F character. This is brilliant. Yes, so this one's going to return false. No, don't apologize. I love it. Very efficient. Oh no, we've got one more. Oh, this one, yeah. This one's an interesting one. So we've got our little not right in the front here. So it's going to be undoing the outcome that we saw previously, which was false. So this will return true. Why might you decide to use a ternary expression? It's shorter, it's more terse, we say, so it might make your code look better if you're using a ternary expression. And can you remember the syntax of a ternary expression? So we've got condition, question mark, output if true, colon, output if false. Yeah, exactly. Alex has got it there. I think Colette also got it. Nice. And then why might you choose not to use a ternary operator? Why might you use your longhand if statement? Legibility, exactly correct. So it can sometimes make your code a little bit more difficult to initially grok, to initially like immediately understand on first read. You kind of have to go, okay, if that, then if not, yeah. And an if else statement can sometimes just be a little bit easier to read, especially if you've got larger blocks of code in a condition that larger blocks of code in the part that will be run if true or if false. Okay, so time to move on to some new stuff. And we're going to add an extra JavaScript data type into our toolbox now. And we did actually end up using this in the little game that we built. And it is an array. The syntax for an array looks like this. It takes a list of values which are separated by a comma and enclosed in our square brackets. So let's take a look at some examples of arrays which are defined in this way. So you can see we can have arrays can hold multiple different data types, and they can be initialized with the array constructor syntax using the new keyword. So we'll look at an example of that in a second, but we can see that arrays can hold strings, numbers, booleans, they can hold a whole mix of things. And as I said, they can also be initialized with the new keyword. So we can use an array constructor function for this. Just to note, the array constructor function starts with a capital A, which can sometimes be a gotcha. And you can use either of these to create an empty array, which you can later then populate with values. So we could, for example, create an empty array by just putting our empty square brackets in there. We're saying we're creating a variable called myArray, which is square brackets. Is that the spread operator? That is not the spread operator. The dot there is just used to, on the previous slide, was just to say there could be a number of things. It's like an English ... rather than a JavaScript ... we're not. I don't think we're going to touch on the spread operator today. Yeah, two different ways of initializing an array, and each value in the array, so each item in the array has what is called an index. And we had a look at indexes when we were picking a random item from our game, our typing game. And the index denotes which position in the list the value is. And the important thing to remember with array indexes is, of course, that we start counting at 0. So the first item in the array is the 0th item. Second item is the item that is at index number 1, and so on, which can get confusing when you're talking about items in the array, but visually it's represented like this. So our index starts at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So rather than saying the first, the second, and the third, we tend to just say the item that is at index 2, just for clarity. And if we wanted to, we could declare this array like this. So we're creating an array that has at index 0, the word hello, at index 1, so on and so forth. And we can access a single value from this array using our bracket notation, which we have already seen. So if we wanted to, for example, get the word hello, we would use myArray square brackets and then the number 2, which would give us the string world. And we can use the same notation to update or change or even add values to an array. So if we take a look at our example from before, we can update a value using our bracket notation and our assignment operator. So we could change world to be, no, sorry, we could change 12 to be an exclamation mark. Or we could add a whole new value to the array. So we're actually increasing the length of the array and we're adding a new value in at index number 7. If you try some of these out in your browser's console, you'll notice that the console prints out a number for the array, and that is the length of the array. So the browser has some useful little tools, and one of the things that it does is to tell you the length of the array. Let's actually build one in our, let's do it in CodePen for now. So let's open up CodePen, start coding, put our JavaScript out, put our console up. Cool. So let's let array equal, let's just make an array with some words in it. So let's type in again. I think by now I'd be able to type, wouldn't you? This is array. Awesome. And if we console log array. Okay, so you can see it's given us the length of the array here, and it's told us that it's an array. And if we're in open up our inspect tool and get our console out, we've got some nice little tools here that, oh, you can't see them. This is the problem with having a super wide screen monitor. There we go. Let's try that again. So we have our, we've created an array that says it's got a bunch of words in it. We've console logged the array, and if we have a look in the console, we can see it's console logged the array. If we have a look in the console, in Chrome's console, it actually has this nice tool that allows us to expand out the array, and we can see the index of each of the values, and we can see the length, and we can see a bunch of things that we can do to this array, which we will have a look at later. And we can use these properties, so this length property, in our JavaScript. So let's turn it back into our slides and have a look at that. So we can do myArray.length, and that will tell us how many values are stored in the array. And this becomes useful when we want to start editing and start updating our arrays, or perhaps even looping through the array to do an additional operation on each. And arrays come with a whole bunch of useful methods that we can use to update the array, to sort it, to filter it. We can see some of these if we expand this out here. So you can see we've got a filter, we've got a sort, we've got a map, we've got a for each, and we're going to have a look at some of these now. So let's start with the push method. Seems like the place to start. Push method lets you add an item to the end of an array. So if you want to like add an extra item on, you don't necessarily have to know the index. You can use push and it'll add it onto the end. So myArray.push and another word will add that item to the end of our array. So if we were to then console log, we would see that we have the extra string howdy in the end of our array there. That's what push does. Index of, will return the first index at which a given element can be found. So if I know, for example, that the word world is in this array, I could use index of to try and find it. So what have we got here? We've got my array.index of yay. So what's that going to tell us? That's going to tell us it is index number 6. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If the thing that you're looking for is not present in the array, so say I looked for index of Fred, for example, it would return a -1. And that's a great way of knowing whether your array contains an object. If it contains -1, it means it's not in there. And we can also check whether it contains it by saying my array.includes and the thing that we're looking for, and we can get a Boolean response from that. So index of will give us a -1 or a number, include will give us a Boolean. So yes or no. Cat method is used to join 2 or more arrays. So if you have 2 arrays and you want to connect them together, it doesn't change either of the 2 arrays, but it returns a new array which contains the 2 arrays joined together, which is cool. So let's say we have an array which contains the strings hello and world, and we're assigning that to array 1. And we have array 2, which says we love and JS as strings. We can make a new variable, which is array 3, and assign that to array.concat, array1.concat array 2. So we're adding array 2 to array 1. If we console log array 3, we will end up with this new array that contains. Arrays can, the ones we've looked at so far have contained numbers and strings, but they can also contain objects. So in this case, we've put a bunch of grocery items into a list with a price on them. And just like our previous array examples, each item in the array is separated with a comma. And importantly, we don't put a comma after the last one. And we can use the dot notation to do a whole lot of exciting things to this array of objects. So let's say we wanted to get all of the items in this array that are £1 or less. There's an array method called filter, which can do this for us. So let's jump into our code pen and see this in action. Oh, I'm going to just set up. Okay. Excuse me while I type. Please do type along. We'll create a grocery list with some items in it. As you can tell, this I wrote this class a couple of years ago because the price of bread has definitely changed. Types. What else? Put it on here. Okay, that'll do. So we're going to create a new variable. Groceries, and we're going to filter for any of the items that are less than £1. So we're going to do groceries, filter, we're going to use our little arrow function here. And we want to return item dot price less than or equal to 1. If we console log groceries, we can see that only bread is less than £1. And the nice thing about this filter method is that it doesn't change the original array that we're filtering. Our groceries array is still exactly the same if we console log it. We just got this new item here, which is cheap groceries. So the next method that we're going to look at is map, and you're going to find yourself using map a lot. Map allows you to take an array and modify it into a new array. Let's say we want a new array that contains the grocery names and not the prices, for example. We can use array.map to do this. And map is very similar to filter. It takes a single function, and then we return the things that we want in the new array. So we are, in this example, we only want the name. So we're going to ask it to return item name. So our map is going to look like this. So we're creating a new variable called item names. For some reason in this example I'm using filter. I think that's a typo. We want to map on this, not filter. So yeah, if you're following along in your console, that should be map instead of filter. And what that'll do is return an array, which is just the item names. And map is super useful for doing calculations on arrays. We ended up using it again in the game. So we were going over each string in our array, and we were wrapping it in a span so that we could do that styling. So map allows you to do a process on each item in the array. It's very useful. The final method we're going to have a look over today is the for each method. And unlike our other methods, for each doesn't return anything. So we won't be assigning it to a variable name, but it takes a function like map, and it looks like this. So it'll need a first parameter, which is the name you give each item in the array. So you could just call it item. And then what we're going to do inside our block of code that is going to be run for each item in the array, we're just going to console log the item.name. The for each method loops through each item in the array, and it'll run whatever is in the body. So between these curly brackets for every item in the array, and we could potentially, we could add a new property to each object, like maybe we're running a discount in our shop and we want to add a new property that is like sale price. We could do that with a for each. We could calculate the new price from the current price and add that as a new property. Yeah, so that is a very brief introduction to arrays. We have already used arrays, so this shouldn't be entirely new to you, but it's just a quick catch up of all the things that we used in our game. We've seen here how we can create a loop with our for each that runs for every item in the array, but there are other ways that we might want to run a loop multiple times that aren't associated with an array. So let's have a look next at JavaScript loops. And loops allow us to run a block of code multiple times. So if we want to have a repetitive or iterative task, maybe. So something that happens and then increases in number. It can save us a lot of time and code. And again, we did this in our game when we were increasing the index. And the code block will loop and run repeatedly until whatever condition that we set is met. And there's a bunch of different kinds of loops in JavaScript, and they all have small differences, but they essentially do the same thing. So they're going to loop over data. And so we'll have a look at a for loop first, and the for loop has syntax that looks like this. It looks a bit like our if, but instead we have a for keyword. And then we have a bunch of statements that we want to check. So usually we'll be checking a number, usually that is increasing or decreasing. And so we want to check whether these things are true, and the for loop will execute the code inside the block. So this is example where we're going to create a variable called I and set it to 0. Usually we want to start counting at 0. This first part is run only once, so we're only going to set I to 0 once. Then we want to define how long we want our for loop to run for. So we want it to run for I is less than 10, or until I is less than 10. So the second statement is our evaluation. So if it ever returns false, then the loop will stop looping. The for will stop looping. And then our final statement is the thing that is going to increment the variable. So we created a variable called I, we set it to 0. We want to run this loop until I is bigger than 10, and we're increasing I every time we loop around. And as we saw in our game, I++ is the shorthand way of saying I equals I plus 1. So I is going to increase by 1 every time. And then inside the curly brackets is the code that we want to loop. So let's have a look at this example here. So sum equals 0, for I is 0, I is less than 10, I++. So creating I, checking until the point where I is greater than 10, adding 1 to I every time, sum equals sum plus I, and then we're going to output sum equals and number. So the first time we loop through, we console log sum equals 0, 0 plus 0 is 0. The second time through, so the first time we loop through, I is set to 0, 0 plus 0 is 0, then we get 1, and so on and so on and so on. Can you tell me if you run it in your browser or if you head computed what number this will output eventually? $45? Should we try it out? I is less than 10, I plus plus, dot, output, sum plus I You think I'd learn and get these code snippets ready for you. So what? No, I've done +1 instead of +I. So we will end up with some 40. Nice. These for loops to do a similar thing to the for each method on an array. If we take up the array example we had earlier, we could loop through the array and log the price. Here we're using our bracket notation, which is going to get the array item at the index of I, and then the dot notation to get a property of the object at that index. Hi, Cedric. So you can see why our for each is maybe slightly more legible than using a for loop. Horses for courses. And our arrays have a lot of methods attached to them, which we saw earlier when we expanded out the console. And if you want to create some arrays, have a look at those different methods in the console, just try them out, see what they do. Look them up on MDN. The Mozilla Developer Network is an excellent place to get your documentation for the different methods that are available on arrays. Ones that you should read up on and practice. So pop is going to be useful to you, slice is going to be useful to you, and splice is also going to be useful to you. Those are ones that you should definitely take a look at. But yeah, one thing, okay, one final thing we should look at is the for of writing out loops that create variables to creating a variable specifically to increment that matches the length of the array. I mean, this is long-winded and ugly and difficult to read on an initial glance. So we have this of, which can be super useful for looping through arrays. So this is a for of loop, and it's basically doing exactly the same thing, but we're using our item keyword in the same way that we did in our for each. Sorry, not keyword, we're using our item name here. So this snippet here does exactly the same thing that this snippet here does. It's going to loop through and then console log the name of each item in the array. And it's more readable, it's more instantly that you can look at that and know what it does. Just to recap this very whirlwind tour again, we had a look at how to declare an array. We had a look at the array constructor function, so that was our new array. We should hopefully now understand what an index is and how to access and update items in an array. We had a look at length, push, concat, map, and for each, and we had a brief look at for loops. So we're now going to use everything we have learned over the last few weeks, and we are going to make a to-do app. Now, I'm aware we only have an hour and a half, so we may not get to the end of our to-do app, I'm afraid, but I will, of course, share the slides with you, which have all of my notes, so you will be able to continue on at home. Just as an aside, if any of you did continue on with your typing games from last week, and you do want to share the URLs, I would love to see them. If not, no worries. But let's get our to-do app going. Okay. So I'm going to be making my to-do app in Glitch again because it helps me just swap tabs, and it also means I get a nice URL to share. You don't have to use Glitch. You can, of course, use VS Code or whatever editor you prefer. CodePen would also work for this. But yeah, I'm going to be using Glitch, so I'm going to just jump in here. So I'm already logged into Glitch. I'm going to start a new project, and the project that I'm going to make is a Glitch website, which can set me up with the basic files that I need. This is cool. And I'm just going to go straight in and delete all of this, and delete all of this, and delete all of this. So we've got a empty HTML, CSS, and JavaScript file all set up for us. Awesome. To-do lists are one of the most popular, and like you might be like, more interesting. They're a standard learning JavaScript demo because they deal with three of the most important parts of building an application. So we've got to accept input, we need to render data on the screen based on that input, and we want to save and load some data. And the really cool thing about building to-do apps is that over the last 10 years or so, storing data between sessions in your browser has become much easier than it ever was. So we're going to be having a look at actually storing this data in a cache, and then we're going to have a look at using our local storage API to save and load the items. And we're going to write some CSS to style it all up. And once we've got everything working and saved inside the browser, we're also going to take a look at how we can use an HTTP API, so an API external to the browser, which is how we're going to save data in the real world. So let's get our index, style, and script set up. So our HTML, we're just going to go with some boilerplate HTML here. Get to watch me type again. I'm not sure if I don't know. To sheet. And just delete everything inside the body. That's much faster. We've got our lang set to EN, which is important for accessibility. I'm sure we could cover it again. So you absolutely can, yes. For anybody who's watching the video, this is the URL. Yeah. Screen. If you're watching later, you can pause and get that. We're setting our character set to UTF-8. We've got our viewport set up. We're going to give it a title, which is to do that. We've got our style sheet link, our script link, and yeah, we're going to add in some HTML. So into the body, we're just going to add in a header, which is going to contain our H1, which is just going to be the name of the app. So mine to do that. And we'll style that up later. And then outside of the header, we're going to add in a main. And the main is where we are going to put our tasks in. And our task is just going to be a list of items. So we are going to make it a UL. And the URL, we're going to put an ID on it so that we can select it easily. And so we give it an ID of tasks. Inside our UL, we're going to have a bunch of LIs. So for now, we're just going to put in a fake task. So LI task. Get that done. Do that fast. Just so that we can see it while we're building our application. So we can see our H1, we can see our task in here. Now what we need to do is we need an input and we need a button so that we can type in our task that we want to do and we can click add to add those tasks. So above our UL, we're going to put in an input and we'll give that an ID of new, because this is where we're going to put our new tasks. We're going to style it up later, so we're also going to give it a class of new input, type of text. We want it to be a text input. And with our text inputs, we can give them a placeholder, which is just that sort of grayed out text that's inside an input. So our placeholder is going to be a new item or whatever placeholder text you want to add in there. And after our input, you're going to put in a button. The button is going to have an ID of out. It's going to be an class new button and the word add inside it for accessibility. Bring that onto a new line. This is a personal preference. When I have an element, an HTML element that only has text inside it, I like to put it all on one line rather than have it drop down and have just the text floating. So rather than this, I prefer this. I think it's neater visually, entirely up to you what you prefer. So then what we're going to do is we're going to write some code that is going to pick up whatever is typed. And when we click on add, it's going to add it into a new LI onto the page. We want to be able to style this. So I'm just going to put it in a div for now with a class of new. We'll see why later when we get to styling. Those inside there. So now on to our JavaScript. We just to check in the HTML. Yes, we've got the defer in our script, so that's all good. So the first thing we're going to do exactly the same thing that we did in the game. We're going to set up all of our variables and select each of the DOM elements that we want to be able to edit. So we're going to set up a const of task input, which is going to be our document get and this is going to be new. So that's the input add button. It's add and tasks. So that's all of those set up so that we can now do something with them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to listen for a click on the add button. because that means we want to add something to our list. So we're going to use event listener and listen for a click. Again, exactly the same that we did in our typing game. So we're going to say add button dot event listener. We are listening for a click, and on click we want to run a function, and the function that we want to run is we want to add a new item. So we're going to call the function add new item, and that function isn't defined at the moment, so JavaScript is like, oh, it is not defined, so let's define it. And for now, we're just going to console our item. Awesome. So we should be able to now click on add, and it should console log that item. There must be a way in Glitch to see the console. There just must be a way. No, I don't know how to Glitch. Possible. Okay, never mind, we're going to do what we did last time and preview in a new window, open up inspect to inspect to console, click on add, and you can see that add new item has been logged. Awesome. We now want to store our items somewhere, and we're going to store them in an array. So we're going to create an array called items to store the tasks in a set. So let's do that. So above our function definition, we're going to create a new array. I'm going to call it items. It's just going to, for now, be an empty array because we don't have any tasks in our to-do list. And why don't we, in fact, yeah, let's add an item into our array. Our array is going to be an array of objects because we want to not only know what the do item is, so the task, we want to know whether it's been done or not. So we're going to have an array of objects. So our first object is going to look like this. The value is just going to be this thing, and then it's going to have a complete. And complete is going to be a Boolean, so it's either true or false. At the moment, complete is false because we haven't done that thing yet. And, what we're going to do with the complete is we're going to say we can maybe put a strike through the list in the visual representation of the list once it's rendered in the browser, and we'll be able to put a little checkbox. So once you check the checkbox, we can put a strike through or something, however you would like to visually represent that the task has been completed. Now what we want to do is we want to loop through each item in the array and render them into the list. Oh, look at that, you've all broken Glitch. Too many requests. Okay, never mind. We don't need the visual right now. What we're going to do next is do a for loop to loop around each item in our array. We're going to say for. I'm going to use a for of because, as we saw earlier, it looks much nicer. So item of items. And for each item inside our array of items, we want to create an li, which we're going to add into our UL. So we are going to run a function which is going to do that for us. So we're going to call that function create element task, and it's going to need to know which item it is. And then let's make a new function to do that. Create element, what did I create element for that? Let's take the item. Now we need to create a new list item. For now, let's just say awesome. There's a whole bunch of different ways that we could do this, that we could create the new list item. You know, we could write out the HTML ourselves inside the JavaScript, but I personally think that looks a bit ugly and it can be a bit unpleasant. You know, we need our backticks and then we don't get our nice IDE syntax highlighting, because everything in the backticks is considered a string. And you know, writing JavaScript as a string is just really annoying. And HTML offers us a way of creating what we call a template. And you can add the template to your page, but it's not rendered visually. But then you can use your JavaScript to sort of pick up that template of HTML and insert it into the page. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to create a template that is our list item. And because that list item is going to get more complicated the more functionality we add to our app, it's better to write it as a template than it is to write it as a bunch of HTML strings in our JavaScript. Because what we want to do is not only are we going to have the list item with the text, we want to be able to put a checkbox in there, which is going to say, has it been completed? We want to be able to put a delete button in there to say, like, actually, I'm not going to do this item, or maybe you want to delete it once it's completed. So we're starting to build up a whole load of HTML elements. So let's build that template into our HTML. So right at the bottom, after our main, but still inside our body, we're going to use this template element. And we're going to give it an ID so that, again, we can select it easily in our JavaScript, and we're going to call it task template. You will notice that whatever you type in here doesn't get rendered in the document. The HTML treats it like it's display none. It's not going to get shown on the page, but it is there ready for our JavaScript to select. Let's get an li in here. Inside the li, we are going to put a span which contains the actual item itself, so the text. So this is going to have, again, we're going to need to style this. So we're going to give it a class of item text. Then we also, as I mentioned, want to be able to have a checkbox in there. So we're going to put in a input plus equals check, and have a type of checkbox. And we also want a delete button. And that's going to have a class of delete. And the word delete. And again, I'm going to bring that up onto one line because I think it looks nicer. And then I'm also going to, I want to be able to style this, but I also want it to be accessible. So I want keyboard users to be able to tab to it. So I'm actually going to surround this in a label, which is just going to make it a little bit easier for our keyboard only users. And I'll give the label a class of item. And I'm going to take all of everything that we just wrote and put it inside the label. So that is our template. And as you can see, it hasn't done anything yet. It hasn't been rendered. So we need to now write some JavaScript, which is going to select that HTML, and we can use it to build up a task. You need me to zoom in a little bit. Assume it's okay, it doesn't, it says it's too small. So back in our JavaScript, we have our create element for task. And using HTML templates in JavaScript can feel a little bit fiddly at first. First, we need to find the element on the page. So we're going to actually select the templates. We're going to create a new variable. I can spell. And select our task template. And then once we've done that, we need to create a new instance of the template by cloning its content node. And cloning its content node sounds weird, but what it's doing is it's giving you a new copy of the markup that is inside the template. So each of those DOM elements. And we pass, well, in fact, let's write it out first. So const new list item equals template dot content dot clone node. And we pass through to it so that it copies the node and the children inside the node. If you don't, it'll just copy the outer node. And yep, so now we have our new list item, which is a cloned copy of all of the HTML that we just wrote inside the template. So that's kind of cool. Now what we want to do is we want to be able to populate that template that we've got with the data from our text input. So let's do that next. So in our create element for task, we are going to set the text to be the inner text, set the inner text of the text. So item text, we're going to set the inner text of item text to be the value of the text input. Can I say the word text anymore? First, we need to actually select both the checkbox and the text. So text is new list item up. Really, it's kind of like text. So we've not looked at query selector yet. The query selector API is kind of awesome. It lets you run over the fragments of the markup that you picked up and select things by, for example, class, which is what we're doing here. So our new list item is the item. We're finding item text inside of new list item. Let's also set up a variable for the checkbox. And that was, what did we call it? Item check. Item check. Yep. Lovely. So then we are going to say text dot inner text. So last week we looked at inner HTML, I think. Now we're using just inner text, which is going to set the text. I'm going to set it to item dot value and checkbox dot checked is going to tell us whether the item is complete or not. The checkbox.checked is either going to return true or false, depending on whether the checkbox has a tick in it or not. And it's going to complete. We've got our value and our complete, which are going to be set, which are going to set these two things. Sorry. Awesome. And then what we want to do, we want to actually put this into our UL. So we're going to return new list item. So we've prepared this whole item. Now we're going to return it and create an actual for the task. So that's cool. Now we want to actually do something with that. Because at the moment, all we've done is we've created this li, but we haven't actually put it on the page anywhere. So in our, where are we? In our for loop, we're going to set this to a new variable. So const li equals the element for task. So we've returned this new list item, we've set it to a variable called li, and then we're going to append that li to our ul tasks, which is ul.append child. We're going to add li. Yay! So that worked. You can see we've added a new li to do this thing, and it is not currently complete. If we changed this to true, checkbox is filled in. Awesome. Okay, everybody, give me a thumbs up if you are with me so far and you have a task showing up in your to-do app. Give me a thumbs up in the chat. Or, of course, ask questions if you are confused. I realize I'm absolutely flying through this because somebody didn't realize it was the last session, so somebody has too much content to fit in. Okay, awesome. I'm getting some thumbs up. Anybody who hasn't thumbs up, let me know if you have any questions or if you're stuck or if you're just not typing along. That's also cool. Don't worry about it. So now we can remove the hard-coded task out of our HTML. So let's get rid of this one here. We can add maybe some more tasks into our array. So let's make another one. Just to prove that this is working, do this thing also. Great, lovely. So having these hard-coded tasks, like, lovely, but that's not actually the way that we want this app to work. We want to be able to update it when we add things from our text input. So what we want to do is add a new task object whenever we get this add button click. So we're going to push the new task that we get from our input into the array of tasks that currently exist. So we want to create a new object when we input an item, and we want to push that object into our items array. So we have our add new item function, which at the moment does absolutely nothing. So let's update it to do something. So we're going to create a new variable called task. Task is an object, as we know. Task has a value of input value, and it has a complete, and we're going to set complete to false. I'm going to assume that if you are inputting a task into your to-do list, it hasn't been done. So I'm going to set complete to false by default. And then I want to add this task into my array. So we're going to say items dot push, and we saw this earlier. We know that push is going to add an item to the end of an array. So we're saying push our task. Yes, and then we want to then, once this item has been added, we want to actually create the element for the task. So we will then say let new item. I can't spell. I can't type at all today. We're doing exactly the same that we were in our for loop here. Creating the element, and then we are appending it. It's not item, and it's task. Task stop. Sorry. There we go. And then once they have typed something in, so do this. I want to clear this so that I can start adding new things in. So we're just going to do our task input value is an empty string, the exact same that we did in our typing game again. So after we've appended new item, we just want to do task input. Dot value is nothing. And also a nice thing that we can do is we can set, so once we clicked add, so if I say this add, I want to be able to start typing again. So I'm going to put the focus, so that is moving the cursor back into the text box so I can start typing again. So I'm going to also do task input dot focus. Just then move the cursor back into here so I can say do something, add to else, add. That's kind of cool. But you will notice that we've got these things in here that keep turning up. So we're going to actually just empty out our items now because we don't want them hard coded into the to-do app. We don't need these original test items now that we have a working form, so we're going to delete them. And to make the process even easier, so do something, add add. It's a bit laborious to have to keep pressing add, so I'm going to add in a new event listener, and this event listener is going to be listening for a press of the enter key, so that I can just type and press enter to add things to my to-do app rather than having to click the add button every time. So we're going to, after our add button event listener, we're going to add another event listener, which is going to listen for a key up, and then we're going to listen for a particular key. So key up is, imagine you've got a key down, which is you type. Key up is when it bounces back up again once you stop typing. So we're listening for the key up, which I'm going to assume means you finished typing that particular character. So task input dot add event listener. We're listening for a key up event. And on key up, we want to do something. We want to process the key press, so which key was pressed. So let's make a function called process key press. And again, JavaScript is letting us know that we haven't defined that function. So let's add that in as well. So we're going to make a function called process key press. And we're going to pass the event to this function. The event is the key press in this case. And inside of our function, we just want to check if the key that was pressed is the enter key, because all other keys we are going to assume is them typing words. So we will say if event.key exactly equal to enter, and then add new item. And just out of interest, if you console.log your event, you can see all kinds of interesting things you can do with your events and with your event.key. So if we have a look at this thing, yeah, I did that typo. Okay, like that, we can do that. Did that typo twice. Well done. Oh, it's up there. We're getting there eventually. Right. Just need to refresh. Okay. We can see there's all sorts of cool things that you can have on your keyboard events. And the one that we're looking at is the key. There's all sorts of cool things that we can do here. If we press enter, we can see that we've got the key of enter. Importantly here, enter starts with a capital letter. That is a bit of a gotcha, so just make sure you've got an enter in there. And we can see it's created an item for us. So that's made that UI kind of nice and smooth. We want to disable, at the moment I can add a bunch of empty to-dos, which is not the best UI. So we want to, when we're building a UI, we want to do something called helping the user fall into the pit of success. So basically, we want HTML. We are going to just make the button disabled by default, and the way that we do that is literally just by adding the word disabled in there. What they'll do is that'll grey out the button, so I can't click this button anymore. And then we want to enable the button once they start adding something into the input. So we've got our process key event already in our JavaScript. So we already know that they might be typing something. So if the target value is not nothing, then we will enable the button. So we will say in here, add button, because we've already selected that up here. We've already got a variable for that. So we're going to say add button dot disabled equals event dot target dot value trim, because spaces don't count. So what we're doing here is if event.target.value.trim is equal to nothing, so if this is true, then the button will be disabled. If this is false, so if it's anything but nothing, the button will be enabled. So that's cool. So now I can type and add. Can you spot a bug that we've left in here though? Anybody? Sure what? After the first disable is allowing me to add blank. Oh, so it is interesting. That isn't the bug I was thinking of. So we need to read the disabled on after our create element for task, don't we? So after we've done our task input.focus, we want to say, I wonder if this will work. Let's try it. There we go. I can't. It's still one more bug here. Yes. So what we would want. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, we could do it that way instead. Yeah. That's an interesting error here where because we are checking on key press and checking enter, we want to actually double check that the button isn't disabled at this point. So what we want to actually add here is oh, not a triple, a double and not add button disabled. So that won't let you, that'll stop you from being able to add an item with the enter keyword as well, with the enter key, sorry. So before I added that, I was able to press enter to add a new item. So if I just, by getting that, I could still add a new item by pressing enter. So that will stop me from being able to do that at all. Nice catch, select. Okay, so we can now add some items. So, but our delete does nothing at the moment. Then I'll check. There's nothing at the moment. So let's implement the delete. And delete is going to just remove the item from our list. So, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. My cat is crying in the background. Inside our create element for task, we're going to make a new selector. So where we've got our selectors for our text and our checkbox, we're going to make a selector for the delete button. We know it's the time. And this is going to be, again, a query selector on our new list item. We're going to select that delete button. And then we want to add an on-click to our delete button. And so far we've looked at adding event listeners on click. You can also shorthand that with add on click. So we will do delete button, on click. And on click, we just want to directly run a function. We're going to use an anonymous function here because we just want to do this whole thing in line because it's going to be quite slow. So on click function, pass it event. And all we want to do is remove the ally and remove that item from the array. So removing the ally is actually quite simple. We can do a dot remove. So you can say event dot target dot closest I dot remove. And let's just have a look again at what we can get from that event, because event on click is very interesting as well, and it's worth you having a look through the different methods that are available to you here. So we've looked at dot closest. Let's test, added it. On click here, so we can see it's a pointer event, and we can do all of these things. We can use all of these methods. So we wanted to use closest, and then we are going to remove. So if we say, oh, event.target.closest, that's what we use. Let's have a look at event target. So we can see the target was the button delete, and it has the target has a whole load of methods on it. The one that we are using was closest. Actually select, yeah, so by selecting the target, we are basically selecting the ally that is closest to that button, the ally that is closest to that delete button in this case. So if I press item, we know that we're going to get the one that is related to the delete button because it's the closest ally to that delete button. So we don't need to worry that pressing this one is going to accidentally delete that one. The press event or closest is going to take the closest element. And then dot remove literally just takes that whole element, so that whole ally, and removes it from the DOM. So that's cool. We've removed it from the DOM, but we also want to remove it from our items array. And one of the methods on our array that I said that we wanted to take a look at, or that you should take a look at in your own time rather, was splice. And splice is really cool. It allows you to remove items from an array starting at the index of the first parameter and removes the number of items that you provide as the second parameter. So let's get rid of that console log. So after we've removed that li, we want to do items dot splice. And like I said, it takes two parameters. The first parameter is the index of the item that you want to start removing from. So in this case, it's going to be items dot index of the item that we're removing. And the second parameter is the number of items that we want to remove. And in this case, it's just one. What we're saying here is remove the items from the array starting at the index of this particular item and remove only one item. So remove one thing. So that's cool. That's splice. So now let's test out our app. So we have thing 2, thing 3. If I delete thing 2 is gone from our list. Awesome. Now we want to make some sort of change to our event when it has been done or not. We want to make sure that when somebody checks the checkbox, that change is reflected in some way for the user. And the way that we do that is with an on change. Thinking about it, we could actually do this with CSS and selecting the label, but we've only got half an hour, so let's just let's just do it with JavaScript for now. So inside our after our delete button, in fact, before the delete button, let's make a new check for on change of the checkbox. We're going to say checkbox dot on change. This is a shorthand way of saying add event listener and checking for an on change event. Function, again, we're going to pass it the event, anonymous function. And when the item is complete, we are going to set that checkbox to checked. So if we were to, for example, have an array of items which you've already saved, so later on we're going to save our items in the cache. If we have an item that is saved that is checked, we want that to reflect in the UI. So if the item is checked, then we want it to be checked. Thank you, missing an equal. You have the eyes of an eagle today. Awesome. Okay, so at the moment we have a fully functioning to-do app, but it looks kind of rubbish. So let's do some quick styling on it to make it look nice. Let's jump into our CSS. I'm going to put in some my favorite our border box pics because we can't be bothered with dealing with additive padding. So box sizing, border box. We're going to set the font family to Arial because I don't like a serif font. going to set the background color to, I'm going to set it to a nice kind of purpley color that matches my slides. So E, 3, E, F, F. Nice purple color. Then I want it to act sort of like a mobile app, so I'm going to give it a maximum width. Of 360 pixels. And I want it to sit in the middle of the page, so I'm going to give it margin 1 rem auto. Sit in the middle of the page. Or we're going to style up the header. Of course, you don't need to stick with these styles, you can style it however you like. So I'm going to give the header a background color. Another purple, AF7. That's not purple. There we go, that's purple. I'm going to give it a padding of 10 pixels. Just give it a bit of breathing space. And give it a color of white. And let's make it text align center. Let's give it a bit of breathing space underneath. Let's style up the H1. That's looking better. Now we can style up the input. So like I've got new, which I'm going to display flex to make our items sit in one line. So we've got our checkbox, our input, and our delete. We want them all to sit in one line. We want there to be some space between each new item. So we're going to give it a margin bottom. 10 pixels. Let's stick with 10 pixels for now. Let's style up the input itself. Make it display blocked, get rid of that spacing that the line has. We're going to give it a width of 100%. We will give it a padding of 10 pixels. I promise you this will look beautiful. At the moment, Glitch seems to be struggling. Get rid of the border. The border is ugly. And we will give it a size of 1.2. Glitch, you can do this. No, it absolutely can't. Okay, then we're going to style up the button. This is the add new button. To get rid of the border, then get some padding. Because we put display flex, it's actually going to be stretched to be the height of the input, so we don't need to put padding on top and bottom, but we'll put padding on left and right. Outside, set the same as our input, 1.2. Font weight will be bold. Color is white. Background color is going to be our same purple. We're going to put a cursor or pointer on there. So that we get that nice little hand, so that it's obvious that it's a clickable thing. Then we want to style up some button state. So we want to style up the hover and we want to style up what it looks like when it's disabled. So we will do new button hover. And on hover, I want it to just go slightly darker purple. So I'm just going to change the background color. 7, 7, 7, 3, get darker purple, and then we'll style up what it looks like when it's disabled. And we're just going to make it gray when it's disabled, and we're going to change the cursor to back to the arrow so that it's obviously not clickable. CTC, nice gray, and cursor. Ah, look, Flip just caught up. Default. Oh, so that's looking nice. There is a just as an aside, there's a competition called Code in the Dark where you have to write a full web page without looking at it in the browser, and you write all the HTML, all the CSS, and then right at the end of the competition, you open your page up in the browser and see whether it looked anything like you expected it to. And the winner is the one that got closest to the design that was set out for everybody. If you're ever feeling confident in your CSS, have a go of a Code in the Dark competition. They're quite fun. That was a little Code in the Dark example while we couldn't see what we were actually doing. So now let's style our items. So this doesn't look great, so let's style that. So our item, flex, again, we want those 3 things to sit next to each other. Adding 20 pixels, 10 pixels, let's estimate, and background color white. Check. It is going to have a margin right of 2 there. Let's try it. So 1. So we're just going to put space between the checkbox and the item. And the item text. Which is nice color. 67 And we want to get rid of this bullet point here because that looks ugly. So after our H1, we're going to just select the UL and the LI, and we're going to say margin 0, adding 0, and list style none. Those better. Let's style up the delete button. So I don't want the delete button to be shown by default. I want it to only be shown when I hover over that particular item. So I'm going to set its visibility to hidden, and then on hover, set its visibility to visible, but let's just style it up first. So width, 20 pixels, left, also, we want it to sit at the right-hand side of the element, padding 0, border 0, color. So I realize I don't have access to a little bin icon. Let's see if this bin icon still exists. No. We'll do for maybe we could use HTML entity instead. Let's find our list of entities. So I would like a nice bin icon. You can make yourself a nice bin icon and use that. But for now, why don't we find maybe something that looks like a letter D, maybe an X or something. In fact, we could just use the letter X for now. Why don't we do that? So let's make the color like dark. Let's start gray for now. 3999. Yeah, let's do delete after content instead of the X. We'll do size 0 parent. What size content to friend. See what that looks like. That'll do. We don't need a bin. That'll do. So we're going to set the visibility to hidden. And we will then on hover. So we'll delete. No, we won't. We will do item hover. Delete. Visible. There you go. So you can't delete it until you hover over it. Click that, it disappears. Oh, okay. Then we want to show whether our completed tasks are done. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to put a strike through or a line through, as it's called in CSS. So we're going to say if our item checked is checked, find the nearest item text and give it text declaration. Let's try that. Item check. Yeah, okay. Clever UI. Excellent. How much time we got? 15 minutes. We can do local storage in 15 minutes. I believe in us. So, local storage is a browser API that lets your websites save string data in the browser. And we've got two important local storage APIs, local methods that we can use. So we can get item and we can set item. And these are important so that we can save a string and then we can load it back later, even after the page refreshes or reloads. So we're going to use local storage, which is just your browser's cache, to save the items in the array so that when we revisit our to-do list later, or if we close our browser, the data is still going to be saved. And because local storage only stores string and not JavaScript objects, we're going to have to do something called stringifying our items before we save them, which is just turning the object that we had into a string. And then once we get them back, we need to convert them back from a string into an object. So we're going to convert our objects into a string and then string into an object. So let's jump into our JavaScript and let's put in, where should we put it? So after the for, we are going to this. For now, let's test out our local storage. So we're going to say local storage, set item message, and the message that we're going to set is hello. And if we create a new item, we can do local storage, text item, get the message. If we console log it, it should say message. I want to not be a hoax maybe. No. Good start. Okay, let's, for the sake of time, move on and hope that I can remember the way that local storage works. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do some Googling. Cool. So let's make two new functions. One's going to be called get items and one's going to be called save items. Let's make a function called get items. S. And it's just to return nothing for now. But it's going to return an empty array, sorry. And then set items. It's going to set our items and do nothing. So then after our where we've done our listeners up here, we are going to, instead of setting items to an empty array, we are going to set items to get items. So as we saw, our get items is currently just returning an empty array, so that's doing exactly the same that it was doing before. And when we input something, we want to save items. When we update the checkbox, we want to save items. And when we delete, we want to save items, because this is all us changing the state. So in our create element for task, so on our checkbox.change, after we have completed it, we want to save items. And after we have deleted, we also want to save items. Set items. Set items or save items? Save items, sorry. Go. So at the moment we've saved on the checkbox click, we've saved on the delete. We also want to save when we push a new item into a task. So where's our push? So I want to add new item. There we go. So we're also going to save items here. Now let's actually fill out those two functions so that they actually do something. So get items is going to get the item from local storage, and save items is going to put the items into local storage. So save items, I'm going to create a new variable called data. Data is just going to be our stringified version of items. The way that we stringify is we use this JSON stringify method. I'm just going to stringify our items. And we're going to say, hopefully, local storage. Set item. We're going to set an item which we're going to call items to data. Okay, that seems happy. And then we want to actually get it. So in our get items, we are going to create a new variable, which we're going to call items JSON, which is going to get the items. And then we want to parse it because we know it's a string. And what parsing will do is turn the string back into an object. So const items JSON equals local get items. And then we are going to turn the JSON dot parse, which is just going to do exactly the opposite of what the stringify does, items JSON. We need to do a double check here because this might be empty. So this will not be able to parse if the item is empty. So in here, we're just going to make a new const, no items found, and set that to be an empty array as a string. And then if there's nothing in the local storage to get, then we will use no items found instead. So let's test that out and see if it has worked. Test. Refresh. Yeah, our list is remaining now after a page refresh. That was a very, very quick introduction to our local storage. I am sorry if that was like way too much information to pile onto you in 2 hours, but I hope that you now have a working to-do app which stores your item in local storage. What we have got Next is the ability to use an API to actually store the data somewhere else on the internet rather than just in your browser, so that you could maybe use this to do app on a different computer or on your phone. And the data will persist across different sessions. But yeah, we have a working to-do app that saves your data in your browser for now. So that's cool. We have hit time, I am afraid, but let me share the slides with you, share the glitch with you, and thank you all for sticking with me throughout this whole thing. This was such a whirlwind. Let me get you slides. That is the slides to the to-do app. Here is the link to the glitch if you want to see the code. If you want to try out the app, you can do so here. And let me just find the slides for the brief introduction that we did earlier as well. This one. I'm afraid there weren't, oh, the link from Monday's slides, as in last Monday. Yes. So on Monday, we finished off the typing game. So let's go back up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jo, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope I can see that a lot of people enjoy the series so much, and yeah, you will find that all of the videos on GTG Glasgow YouTube channel. And yeah, thank you again, Jo. We will see you in person very soon. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, we want to send you a big hug, and we really appreciate all of the hours and all of the effort that you put to share your knowledge with all of us.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. And yeah, if you want to get me at all in the future, I am at This Is Jo Frank on most of the socials. So if you do want to share your portfolios, I cannot tell you how much I would love to see them. It would make me so happy. Share your projects with me. I would love to see them. And yeah, best of luck to all of you. Thank you so much for coming.
Right. Thank you everyone, and yeah, see you later. Bye bye.